Kathak should also be accessible to more audiences. কারণ আমরা সবাই জানি যে once you start talking about classical dance, সবাই চোখ কান নাক সবই বন্ধ, ও আমি ওসব বুঝি না, আমি অর্ডিনারি মানুষ, why you have to be extraordinary to understand classical dance, সেটা আমি বুঝি না। But that is unfortunately not the fault of the audience. যেভাবে classical dancers have raised classical dance to such a ridiculous level, মানে ওখানে আমরাই পৌঁছতে পারছি না, তোমরা পৌঁছবে কি করে, that's all nonsense. তো ওই যে from being actually sacred, it has become, you know, the sort of halo of sacredness, ও ঢোকাই যাচ্ছে না সেখানে। So দেবশ্রী আর আমি যেভাবে আন্টির কাছে শিখেছি কাথকটা, it's always been very playful, it's always been very much about এটা বোঝো, এটা শেখো, প্রশ্ন করো, নিজের মতো করে করো, don't be afraid of it, don't start worshipping it without understanding it. তো এই ব্যাপারটা, that the accessibility factor needs to be more, সেটা নিয়ে আমরা রণ শুরু করি। তারপর তো প্রথমা হলো, তারপরে 1-1.5 বছর পর শূন্যেসেও হলো, শূন্যেসে তো এখন has gone through many changes। তারপরে অফিসিয়ালি রণ 2004-এ আমরা শুরু করি। আর তখনও by that time I had an interest in theatre, so how to bring dancers and spoken theatre together was of interest for me. তখনও কিন্তু আমি contemporary dance বা contemporary performance নিয়ে আমি ভাবছি না। I have never thought about making, how do I make Kathak contemporary, because that has not been important to me. That's important to other people and I appreciate that, কিন্তু আমার জন্য that has never been, I think now looking back, all the work that I've done with Kathak has really been about how do you make Kathak into a dialogue rather than a monologue. I'm not a solo form trained. So how do you start sharing that? How do you start sharing it not only with more audiences, but also with other people coming from other forms of expression, whether it's another kind of dance, whether it's theatre, whether it's visual art, whether it's designers. So those conversations have been more important to me.
While I stood wrapped in the wonder of it, came missives from the king, who all hailed me, Thane of Cawdor.
Duncan has come tonight. Is this a dagger I see? Yet who would have thought the old man to have so much of blood in him?
The idea of contemporary, again, I would say, a lot of the work that has been produced has been called contemporary by other people, or contemporary ways of looking at Kathak, or contemporary ways of looking at theatre. Those are definitions that I have not given. Specifically coming from a classical dance background, I am a little, not suspicious, kintu the contemporary, the word, especially in terms of dance in India, is very contested. So একটা অপোজিশন তৈরি হয়ে যায়, once you call yourself classical or once you call yourself contemporary, একটা অপোজিশন তৈরি হয়ে যায়। সেটা কেন তৈরি হয় আমি বুঝিনি। I'm working with contemporary choreographers and performers, not in Kolkata so much, but working with contemporary choreographers in Chennai, working with contemporary directors and choreographers abroad. আমার সেইটা কোনোদিন মনে হয়নি যেহেতু I'm trained in Kathak, I'm not being able to, or I should not speak to somebody from somewhere else. What helps is, I think, going back to Raniji's training, that rootedness in Kathak, when Kathak training, the kind of training that we have got, we are very lucky. That depth of training onikera paye, but depth of training combined with open-mindedness, it's not common in the classical dance training world. Shei combination ta amra peyechi, and I think that is what is helping me do whatever I please without thinking, oh ma eta ki contemporary, oh ma eta ki classical. And I have only recently sort of understood the contemporary dance jagotta ki. What are the parameters of how to define contemporary dance, and that differs from place to place. The choreographers I work with in Chennai, very clearly, I remember Preeti Atreya, who I've worked with very closely last 4 bachar dhore. She said the contemporary dance sphere is a place of criticality. So it's not necessarily form based, but it is, are you proposing some sort of discourse through the work? I think what I have started to do is I pick up just one thing and say, acha ami eta ke deconstruct kori. In this piece I'm going to work only with these 3 things, and then that is coming from Kathak. The outcome may not be recognizably Kathak, because I'm working now more with concepts that the Kathak form works with. I'm working with principles of movement that the Kathak form works. For example, Kathak jeta ami prothomei bollam Odissi songe tulona korte giye je, it's a vertical form. Verticality mane ki? Physically, if you are standing on stage, what does it mean to be vertical? Vertical against what? Vertical is a relational term. Unless you have dimensions around you, you cannot say whether it is vertical or horizontal or diagonal. Or up, down, side, you have to have that. So sense of space, in that there is a verticality. What does that verticality convey just by that body being there? So conceptually I'm still working with something that in classical dance forms in India only Kathak works with. Our kono classical dance forms in the vertical stance nahi. They all have bent knee position. The closest is Manipuri, kintu Manipuri is also bent knee. It's just not splayed knee, it is still bent knee. So that's a unique feature of Kathak. But again, when I was working with somebody trained in ballet, Ronone eshe residency kollo, talking about improvisation processes in ballet, how to apply, if they can be applied to Kathak dancers. Ota ekta residency amra korechilam. And having worked with her for 3-4 years on other projects, Onikera bole je Kathak is vertical, ballet is also vertical, onikta similarity ache. Kono similarity nahi. If you actually enter the forms, the body concepts, simply mane Kathak er verticality, you're standing straight, but you're releasing onto the waist. Ei pulta nei Kathak. Ei pulta jodi thake tahole tumi footwork korte parbe na. It's not possible. But in ballet, ei pulta jodi na thake tumi pata tulbe ki kore. So just in the definition of verticality, Kathak and ballet are already different. So just to look at it visually and say, oh, Kathak's no bent knees, ballet no bent knees, therefore they are similar, is ridiculous. আর এটা আমরা অনেক দেখেছি, একটা পুরো পর্যায় আছে আমাদের হিস্ট্রিতে, Kathak and ballet, Kathak and flamenco, Kathak and tap. So that I feel is a bit superficial. We're not actually entering how the dance is constructed, how the human body gets constructed through the training in that dance form. It might look similar, but internally the construction is not at all similar. So these things are what are interesting me now. So I would say that it can be called that it is okay, a contemporary approach to the Kathak body, but that does not mean that the outcome may still be a very traditional, but it is I think the constant questioning of it আমি কেন করছি, I have received this, এরকম ভাবে আমি এত বছর করে এসেছি, আমার করতে ভালো লাগে, it's beautiful, but what is beautiful? To constantly question what is beautiful, cannot this also be beautiful, is there not beauty in ugliness, what are we calling ugly, why are we calling it ugly and this is beautiful? So all those things are ideas that I'm working with now. Sometimes they find expression in something which is purely traditional, sometimes they find expression in something that may be called more contemporary.
As a Kathak dancer, being trained for more than 20 years in Kathak dance, like now in a position you want to actually, the question of position of classical dance in the whole society and in terms of the practice for the artists as well. So now you are in a position to critique the form itself. So in that way, so you are more interested in contemporariness of the whole your practice. So then if you like একটু যদি বলো যে এই যে ক্রিটিক করছো এই যে কথক ডান্স ফর্মকে, তো এইটা তুমি কিভাবে
করছি এখনো আমি ঠিক জানি না। আই থিঙ্ক আই এম এট ভেরি আর্লি ডেজ ইয়েট, কারণ দিস হোল আইডিয়া অফ ক্রিটিক্যালিটি অ্যান্ড বডি পলিটিক্স sort of struck me, or I started thinking about it only after starting to work with Preeti Atreya, which was 2014. It's just been 3.5 years. Preeti, আমি Preetiর কাছে গেছিলাম because I really love her work. She is part of, she used to work with Padmini Chetur and now she's branched off doing her own work. Her base training is Bharatanatyam, but completely contemporary work. আর ওর সঙ্গে in her work there is a it's very, very engaging. Many people can access it. Talking of critique, a critique of contemporary dance often is the same thing with classical dance. You know, people are on the one hand saying classical dance, contemporary Bollywood. So, but her work is really accessible. I asked her to work with me. 2013-14 অনেক কিছু 10 বছর রণনের কাজ হয়ে গেছে। আই ওয়াজ ফিলিং এ নিড টু রিফ্রেশ মাই সেলফ, কারণ 10 বছর তো রণনের যা কাজ হচ্ছে, আই ওয়াজ ক্রিয়েটিং, আই ওয়াজ ডিরেক্টিং, আই ওয়াজ কোরিওগ্রাফিং, অ্যান্ড আই থিঙ্ক আই রিচড এ পয়েন্ট যে আচ্ছা ঠিক আছে, আই নিড টু রিফ্রেশ মাই সেলফ অ্যাজ অ্যান আর্টিস্ট। আমি এই কাজগুলো কেন করছি? আই নিড টু রিএন্টার, আই নিড ফ্রেশ এয়ার ইনটু হোয়াট আই অলরেডি হ্যাভ। তো আই আস্কড, প্লাস অ্যাট দ্য সেম টাইম আই ওয়াজ সিইং আ লট অফ what was being কেন contemporary Kathak নিয়ে আমার এই প্রবলেমটা রয়েছে। I was seeing a lot of work which was being called contemporary, whether Kathak or contemporary some other classical work, and I was seeing it key. When if I do a lot of lighting, if I do a lot of costume design, if I do a lot of electronic music, তোমার ওটা কি contemporary হয়ে যাচ্ছে? And I was seeing a lot of this stuff being imported from primarily the UK. Giving back to India, প্রচুর colonialism করেছো আর করো না। So I was really getting quite disturbed, কারণ it was also then becoming that Kathak dancers or any other dancers who are trained here began to aspire to that. বাইরে থেকে আমাদের তো এই প্রবলেমটা আছে না, বিদেশ থেকে এসছে বাজবিগুলো। So I was seeing Kathak performed by mediocre or competent performers, but with very little artistry in the form itself, but packaged in this big thing called like design this big choreographer and প্রচুর নাম টাম দিয়ে fabulously packaged, but actually if you look at the content এটা কি কিছুই না, তার চেয়ে আমার দেবশ্রী স্টুডেন্ট ভালো নেচে দেবে, এরকম একটা অবস্থা।
মানে content itself, the dance itself, or the idea behind dance,
I think it has all become this how to I was objecting also to the fact that তুমি especially Kathak মধ্যে তো একটা ফ্ল্যাম্বয়েন্স আছে, ইটস এ ভেরি শোই ফর্ম, বাট ইফ ইউ মেক ইট অনলি আ শোই ফর্ম ইউ আর লুজিং সো মেনি আদার থিংস। ইউ হ্যাভ ভেরি স্মল মুভমেন্টস, সেগুলো Kathaker, if you look at the literature on Kathak, if you look at the literature in Thumri or the music forms of Vrindavan, of UP, of Rajasthan, there's something called a Lakshan Geet, Kathaker Lakshan Geet. এই যে এই কথাগুলো আছে না, আদা, Kathak কি আদা, সেটা তুমি ভারতনাট্যমে পাবে না। ইটস নট পসিবল। ভারতনাট্যম প্রথম কথা আদা কথাটা ভারতনাট্যমের সঙ্গে যায় না, ইটস এন উর্দু ওয়ার্ড, উর্দু ডাজন্ট গো উইথ ভারতনাট্যম। তো ওইগুলো কিন্তু লুপ্ত হয়ে যাচ্ছে আস্তে আস্তে, বিকজ উই আর ইন দিস, ইটস দ্য স্পিরিট অফ দ্য টাইম অলসো, দ্যাট everything has to be fast, everything has to be short, everything has to make an impact in the first 3 seconds. So Kathak again is the only dance form, classical dance form, that works with vilambit, slow pace. যখন আন্টি নাচতেন মহারাজজি, আজ অব্দি যখন আমি দেখি vilambit নিয়ে উনি 20 মিনিট 8 ঘন্টা উনি নাচবেন vilambit, ওই পেসটা। সো রিয়েলি টু ফিল আউট টাইম, নো আদার ডান্স ফর্ম ডাজ ইট। ইটস এ স্পেশালিটি অফ Kathak. ইউ হ্যাভ স্লো ডান্স না, মণিপুরিতে তো রয়েছে, ভারতনাট্যম, কুচিপুড়ি সব স্লো আছে, but that amount of dedicated time given to just vilambit doesn't exist in other forms. ওটা পুরো কিন্তু মুছে যাচ্ছে। পিপল আর ডুইং ইট জাস্ট অ্যাজ আ টোকেন, হ্যাঁ করতে হবে, করে দিলাম 5 মিনিটে, এখন ধীরে ধীরে করে নাচি, প্রচুর ধুলো ওড়াবো, প্রচুর চাক্কর করবো, প্রচুর হাততালি করবো। That is what is happening to Kathak over the last decade or so, more than that. So that was beginning to worry me. So that's when I went to Preeti and said that, look, these are the things that, for these two reasons, I think I need to refresh myself as a Kathak dancer, as a Kathak trained person. I want other ways of looking at the form. And these are my concerns. These small things, almost invisible things are there in Kathak. I'll be happy to let that go. So that was my proposal to Preeti. So coming back to this thing about contemporary, the criticality, that piece that Preeti created for me, তখন তো প্রীতির সঙ্গে কাজ করছে এত অ্যানালিটিক্যালি ভাবছি না, কারণ going into training with Preeti, my body had to unlearn a lot on one hand and deconstruct what it had already learned. For example, the opening section, 15 minutes, it's only a 45-minute piece, a 40-minute piece. 15 minutes, it's me with my back to the audience in one place, vertical stance, working only this part of the back, this upper part of the back. The ones that gives rise to these sort of movements, which are there only in Kathak and Odissi, or কোনো form এগুলো নেই. But usually যখন আমরা Kathak করি, this becomes part of a larger movement. But if I drop all this and I move only this, then I have to really make sure that 200 people sitting 4 meters, 5 meters away or more, ওরা দেখবে কি করে এইটুকু একটা movement. So that kind of muscular awareness, that kind of training I went into with Preeti, was a different level of training altogether. So things like that. And then aste talking to her, this idea of criticality, the idea of the politics of the body, and the idea of, okay, politics of the body, everybody has a politics of the body. You don't have to be a dancer to have politics of the body. Amra rasta ghate kibabe hete berai. It is a social conditioning that you are part of. In fact, recently I got an email from somebody I consider a mentor in London, and she had looked at the Shunya Se video and long discussion, and one of the things she had mentioned was dancers who are bold in their bodies. So this idea of being bold in your body is not about movement, it is about an attitude. And that, working with the dancers in Rono who are predominantly from a Bengali middle class background, that background influences your body, and that is the body that you're dancing with. So you can't leave your context behind because you are whether classical dancer, contemporary dancer, whatever. But I think the contemporary way of thinking, the critical approach, allows you to think of, to acknowledge first that yes, this is the body politics that I represent. Make a decision, do I want to critique it or not? And then see, okay, if I want to critique it, what are the tools available to me? How can I critique that? অনেকগুলো মুভমেন্টস আছে তোমার, তুমি একটা বোল করছো, সেখানে হাতও নড়ছে, পাও নড়ছে, টর্সো সব নড়ছে, তুমি সব নড়াতে তুমি জানো, খুব ভালো লাগে। But if you are going to actually pick up one movement and deconstruct it, to what level can you deconstruct it? And then once you deconstruct it, what does that communicate to the audience? You don't need to decide what that communication is. That is another thing that I find very liberating about the idea of contemporary dance. is that even in classical dance you have a lot of abstraction, but classical dance has, it's not about the form, it's about how classical dance is perceived. There is a need to communicate a certain something. In the contemporary thinking, there is a need to communicate, but not a need to communicate something specific.